why is it so difficult to accept God's love, in your opinion?
Oh, man, I yeah, if I
You
had
have
the
like
answer
an
to
hour
that,
left, right?
I know, right? Yeah. How many hours do we have? Yeah, well, I often go back to something Pope Francis said in April of 2013. This was when he was newly elected Bishop of Rome, and the actual kind of cathedral of the Diocese of Rome is the Lateran Basilica. And so every new pope, they become pope the night of the conclave and all this. But then there's a formal kind of installation as the Bishop of Rome, as the Pope, right? And that takes place at the Lateran Basilica, and there is the cathedra, the chair of the bishop there. And so, him celebrating Mass there, sitting in that chair, this is all part of it. And Pope Francis, in that particular liturgy, gave a homily where I and others, I'm not original in thinking this way, have talked about this as kind of Pope Francis announcing his mission statement. And here we can, more than a decade now, look back and see that this is kind of par for the course, which is all about mercy. And I think, to your point, why is it so hard to accept God's love? I think it's because fundamentally we don't believe that we're worthy of it, that we need to do something. And part of that, if not most of that, I think is conditioned by our experience of such qualified love in our human relationships, even those in our families where there might be the closest thing in healthy family relationships to an unconditional love. If we're honest, even that becomes conditioned. We're never 100% sure that something in our life, or a fight that breaks out, a disagreement, a disagreement of perspective or politics, or you name it, wouldn't be the thing, that straw that breaks the camel's back of that relationship. There's always just that edge of the precipice. And so if we take that experience of conditioned love, of qualified love in this life, all we have to talk about God and understand God is our human experiences and language. We know that God is incomprehensible, but yet God is knowable. We can talk about God, but we do so analogously. We do so somewhat removed. And so I think when we're thinking this way, we have no choice, no recourse, but to draw from our experience of human love. I think it's harder for people who have felt an absence of that close to unconditional love. It doesn't mean that even those who have can accept God's love completely. And what Pope Francis says in that homily has always stayed with me. I'm going to paraphrase it here, is that he says, God doesn't actually want anything from you. God is already there. All God wants you to do is turn to God. I've always visualized this as like you're facing one direction and God is like literally standing behind you. You don't have to pay anything, you don't have to do anything, but turn toward God. Just turn around, in the fear that we're going to be rejected or overlooked or minimized or what have you, that we carry with us from our earthly relationships, I think inhibits too many people from just turning. That's all. Pope Francis says, don't, literally, that's it. God will take care of the rest. And how few of us are able to turn around. I know I struggle with that, right? It goes back to the true self. It goes back to Francis of Assisi's notion of who we are before God. And so we're always in a process of becoming, becoming more who we are, or maybe, to borrow that Mertonian language, maybe becoming less of who we are in that spirit of the false self. Um, but I do believe that God, I trust what Pope Francis says, God's mercy is there. It's just a matter of us turning to God. It's just a matter of us accepting that love, which to some people sounds, probably like, too theoretical or abstract, or too, touchy feely or what have you. But I think, is that not what Jesus's message was all about? It was made concrete and present by his outreach and his inclusion, his invitation. What does that say to us about how we move through the world? What does it say to us about how we understand ourselves? And I think that combination of Ronner and Merton and Francis and Jesus's own message in the Gospels has invited me to continue to recognize that it's not a one and done, that we're always in a process of becoming. So maybe that's probably a good place to end, because we're continuing to journey forward.